Hi there! In this video I'm going to take some pictures from my bird hide, but I'm also going to explain why I've started using my Nikon D850 again for wildlife photographs instead of my Z6 Mark II. So it's been a few months since I've last filmed a video here in the bird hide in my garden, so I wanted to spend some time this morning taking some pictures and filming it for you. But I also wanted to take a little bit of time explaining why I've started to use my Nikon D850 for wildlife photographs instead of my Z6 Mark II. I did get a comment a few weeks ago from a subscriber who'd noticed that I was using my D850 a lot more rather than my Z6. So in this video I'm going to tell you why. So I'm going to spend some time taking some photographs and just enjoy my photography. So if you're here to find out about why I've started using the D850 more and are not interested in watching me take pictures of birds, then I'll put a timestamp down here and you can skip forward in the video to that point. Now the first thing that I need to do this morning is change these perches out. I only put these up yesterday, but already because it's quite warm, the leaves are wilting, so I need to change those out. And I'll also just mention that I've got here a theoretically squirrel-proof feeder. It's got a cage around it, but the squirrel has managed to work out how to take the top off. Even though I've made it very tight, I've splayed out the lugs underneath, even I find it hard to get back on, the squirrel manages to get it off no problem. So I'm going to have to look into that. So that's the two perches put up. Now I am going to have to be a little bit careful and thoughtful today when I'm taking pictures. The camera that I'm filming on is virtually in the position the camera will be in from the hide, but you can see behind the perches we've moved the chicken enclosure. We tend to rotate it around the paddock here so that the chickens don't eat off too much grass, but some of the posts will be in the background of the shot. So I'm going to have to make sure I've got a very shallow depth of field and just be very careful about where the posts appear in the shot. Just keep that in mind, and it's worth thinking about whenever you're taking pictures. Lots of people focus on the foreground but ignore what's going on in the background, and the background can really make or break a shot. Now there might be a few shots of birds that I've taken on the ground where I've just caught the bottom of the fence that's enclosing the chickens. Now if that's the case, when I get the shots back in the computer, I'll remove the fence using Photoshop. Now if you're interested in that kind of thing, I have made a few videos on editing bird photographs, so I'll link them down below in the description and I'll put a card up here. If you do have any ideas of videos that you'd like to see me make or any topics you'd like to see me cover, let me know down below in the comments. I have had a comment from Jess in my Instagram account that has suggested going to visit Martin Mere RSPB Reserve, which I intend to do in the next few weeks. If you're new to the channel or haven't already done so, you can do me a really big favour by clicking like, subscribe and the bell notifications. That way you'll stay up to date with all of my future releases and it really helps the channel. One thing it's really difficult to get over in a video like this is just how much waiting around there is when you're doing bird photography. I must have sat now for about 2.5 hours to get the shots that you've seen in this video. I haven't managed to get any of the birds landing on the perches I put out, which is really frustrating. I did go out and lower them down so they were more on the level of the feeders. That didn't work either. And so it's just frustrating sometimes. It's just luck whether the birds will land on. There are little techniques that you can do. If you really wanted to get a bird landing on a perch, you could strip away all the other feeders and possible perches and just leave one perch and one feeder. but I like to have a bit of variety rather than just sitting and looking at one for 2.5 hours. So I'll have a chat about why I have started to use my Nikon D850 more than my Z6ii for wildlife photography, and there's basically two reasons. The first reason is the fact that it just will not acquire a focus lock anywhere near as quickly as the D850 does, and then when it does, sometimes it's not as accurate, especially over longer distances. The second issue I have is image stabilization. On the 200 to 500mm lens, there's inbuilt stabilization into the lens, which works really well on the D850, but just doesn't work at all on the Z6 Mark II. That might have something to do with the FTZ adapter not really communicating properly. Now, there is in-body stabilization on the Z6ii that does kind of help, but it's still not as good as the in-body stabilization on the 200 to 500mm lens. So to try and demonstrate the focusing problems is quite difficult because it seems to be related to the D850 using an optical viewfinder compared with the Z6ii using an EVF. Now, I'm not particularly technical and there must be a reason why this happens. I just know that it does happen. So I'm filming through the optical viewfinder of the D850 at the moment, and you can see that the camera is focused on the trees in the background. Now, if I try and focus on one of the perches in front, it comes into focus straight away. So what I've done now is I've swapped the 200 to 500mm lens over onto the Z6ii using the FTZ adapter. I'm pointing the camera at the same area now, which is the same perch, and I've focused on the trees again in the background. But this time, when I try and now focus on one of the perches, I'm moving the camera around the leaf that's at the end of the branch, just trying to acquire a focus lock on any of those points, and it just will not focus on something in the foreground. The only way that I can manage to do that is to tilt the camera right down, focus on the foreground that's like the ground. Now you can see the leaves, and what I can do now I can acquire a focus, and that is just slowing the whole process down and is really, really annoying if you're trying to quickly take pictures of wildlife. Now, this may be a fault with the camera that needs looking into, or it might be to do with the way that the Z6ii communicates with the 200 to 500mm lens through the FTZ adapter. But whatever the problem is, it's not very good for me when I'm trying to take pictures of wildlife. The problem with the image stabilization is a little bit more difficult to demonstrate, but it is very noticeable when you've got the 200 to 500mm lens all the way out to 500mm on the D850. Once you activate the autofocus, the whole image just seems to lock into place a lot more, and the image stabilization really does noticeably have an effect, whereas this doesn't happen on the Z6ii. Now, I know it's not just me that has this problem, because I did get a comment from a subscriber a few months ago asking me a question about the image stabilization and whether I had a problem with the Z6ii. So again, whether this is just an issue that the Z6ii has and it won't communicate properly through the FTZ adapter, or whether it is an issue that I've got with the Z6ii camera. But having these two issues with a new camera is a little bit disappointing, really. Maybe just one of those things. I may need to take it in and get it looked at, but either way, it is just a little bit annoying. I will just finish this video by saying I still think the Z6ii is a great camera, despite the fact I've got a few niggles. You just have to learn its foibles, and I have made a video that I'll link just here talking about how this camera compares with the D850 overall, and I think it stacks up really well. And when you've got the Z lens on the front, I've not had any issues at all with focusing, so it could be to do with the optical viewfinder possibly, or the communication through the FTZ adapter. I'm not quite sure because I'm not totally technical like that. Maybe somebody in the comments can let me know if you know any more. But that's not to say that the Z6ii is not a great camera. So I'll leave you with a few more shots that I've taken this morning before closing out the video. So despite a few frustrations this morning with the birds not landing on the perches that I put out and waiting for 2.5 hours, I still think I've got some really nice images of birds. Now, if you're more technical than me and have any ideas about the problems I might be having with my Z6ii, then do leave them below in the comments. I'd be really appreciative of that. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, you can let me know down below in the comments, and you can also send me those ideas for future videos. You can support the channel by clicking like, subscribe and the bell notifications, but also by visiting my Teespring store. There I've got a range of merchandise on offer. Watch out for next week's video. That goes live at 4 o'clock on Sunday, but all that's left now is to say stay safe, and I'll see you soon. Ugh, that's wet. About why I might be having about what I might be. I think there's a chicken laying an egg right behind the camera.